Welcome into the PFN Bengals podcast. I am Dallas Robinson. He is Jay Morrison. Jay, the Bengals pulled off a regular season finale victory over the Cleveland Browns. Didn't really mean anything, but it still felt good, right? I mean, they finished with a winning season. We got to see some good production from some young players. The entire AFC North finished with a winning record. I mean, there are impressive things to come off this victory, but at the end of the day, it didn't really mean anything in the playoff race. We'll get into that game and kind of recap what went on Sunday. But what we're really going to focus on in this episode is our end of season awards. We've got all sorts of awards for you from this Bengals season that Jay and I have come up with, but Jay, let's start with that Browns Bengals game on Sunday. Like I said, it didn't really have a ton of meaning in terms from a record standpoint or anything like that. But what stood out to you, I think, from this game, from this 31-14 win that the Bengals pulled off on Sunday?
Yeah, coldest preseason game in NFL history. I mean, it just had that preseason feel where, the Bengals were playing to win. The Browns obviously weren't. I think that's what stands out to me is the Bengals, and I kind of mentioned this in some of the stuff I wrote leading up to the game. Like, you better win that game. You're saying you're going all in to win. You're playing your starters. Have they lost that game and finished with a losing record and finished 0-6 in the division and lost to a bunch of backups? I mean, that would have been a really bad look. So that the fact that they were willing to do that, to put that on the line, and you see that happen a lot. You sometimes the teams that are playing for something, the teams that aren't, even though it's backups and all that, it doesn't work out the way you would expect it would. So I thought that was significant that they pushed all their chips in and they really dominated that game. It got kind of sloppy late, and we were just starting to look up last shutout in Bengals history. Well, some people were. I already knew what it was because it was also against the Browns. It was the Johnny Manziel start back in, I believe it was 2014, where everywhere you went in the city that weekend, people were doing this, and they were doing it to the team bus riding into the game. And the Bengals just stomped them in that game. And so it did. It had that feel like they were gonna shut them out. It got away late. Good for Mixon to hit his incentives. Got an extra $100,000 by getting 2 extra touchdowns. We got a chance to see some of the young guys. Yoshi Voss, 2 touchdown catches, kind of a hint of what he could maybe develop into. If they lose T. Higgins, if they lose Tyler Boyd, both of which seem likely. But other than that, there wasn't a lot of significance. I thought it was great for Jake Browning to have that kind of game and go out on top as a starter with a 4-3 record. We focus so much on Bengals 8-9 versus 9-8, but for Browning to be 4-3 and kind of prove to the rest of the league that he belongs as a quarterback in this league. Maybe just a backup quarterback, maybe not. I mean, 7 games, he's still got time to improve some more. He's probably not going to get an opportunity to be a starter anywhere else, but down the road, you just never know. And then one other thing that kind of struck me about this, because we talked about it. Yes, they finished with the winning record, first division since 1935 to have every team above 500. I went and I looked, and teams in the last 5 years that have finished with a winning record but still fell short of the playoffs. There's been 16 of them, 11 of them, which is 69%, have come back the following year to make the playoffs. And so it's not you see Super Bowl teams fall apart the next year. It feels like even though it's the disappointment of having a winning record and not making the playoffs, it feels like there's an incentive there, a springboard, if you will. And who knows? Every team's different. Not all teams probably went to the AFC Championship game 2 years in a row and then missed the playoffs. But just the fact of being good enough to finish with a winning record, which with the hardest schedule in the league by far this year, the Bengals did, and missed the playoffs. I think that's significant. Of those 11 teams that made the playoffs the following year, 6 advanced. So there's something there that, people talk all the time. Can momentum carry over from the first weekend in January, the second weekend in January until the next September? Maybe not, but maybe there is something to it of knowing that you played well, you fell short, you're this close, the little extra incentive to kind of hit the ground running at OTAs and make next season what you want it to be.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And there are obviously guys on this team who won't be part of this roster next year, but there are a lot of guys who will be. I mean, I'm sure it feels good to them to go out with a win like this. Most of the coaching staff will probably be back next year. It feels great to go out kind of on a positive note instead of, like you said, losing to Jeff Driscoll. That would not have been a good way to go out in this final season. I thought seeing Charlie Jones especially catch that seam ball up the middle was incredibly impressive, especially given the drop that he had earlier this season. I think Tyler Boyd is far more likely to be gone than T. Higgins. Both could be gone, but I think Tyler Boyd is basically a guarantee. Really good to see Charlie Jones, I think, get some snaps because he could be that guy in the slot next year. I think to finish with a winning record and kind of look forward to next season on a positive note is a plus. Again, it's disappointing to be in this position and kind of know that you can't advance the next week, but given everything the Bengals faced this year to finish 9-8, I don't think we would have picked a 9-8 record when Joe Burrow went down with a season-ending injury.
Mm-hmm.
Looking forward to these games, I think we would have been, called us crazy if we would have said they could have finished with a 9-8 record. So it is impressive, I think, to wrap up the season that way. Speaking of wrapping up the season, Jay, let's have some fun. Let's get into some of these awards.
Let's do it
for the rest of the season. It's been a long season. It's been a long season with a lot of ups and downs for the Bengals. Let's kind of recap and see how everybody did and hand out some awards. We've got a bunch of categories here. I've got a long Google Doc that I'm staring at, Jay, right now. Let's start off the top with team MVP. I think this is a kind of interesting one because I think there are a couple candidates here, and I think you could go one of several ways. I'm going to throw it to you, Jay. What do you have for team MVP for the Bengals 2023 season?
So I just submitted my official vote on this for the Pro Football Writers of America. The Cincinnati, all the local chapters do a Good Guy Award, which we gave to Jamar Chase last week, and then an MVP. And had the Bengals made the playoffs, my vote would have been Jake Browning. But because they didn't, I went with Jamar Chase. And we've never had a guy win the MVP and the Good Guy Award in the same year. I don't think. I have to go back and double check that, but I don't think that's ever happened. But he was the best player. You can make an argument for Trey Hendrickson, incredible year, but how much better did he really make that defense? I mean, the defense wasn't very good. The offense was humming. It looked as good as it's supposed to look for 5 weeks when Burrow was healthy. Chase was a huge part of that. They lost the game when Chase didn't play. I think that kind of plays into his value as well. I mentioned Browning, I mentioned Hendrickson, but I didn't really debate it much. I thought Chase was the easy pick here.
I think Chase is a good pick. I went with Browning just because I don't know where this team would have been with a different backup quarterback option. Mm-hmm. I mean, you look at his numbers. He was 8th in EPA per play among quarterbacks with 200 attempts. If he would have qualified for QBR, he would have been 10th. I think that I don't think you can overlook that. No one expected, I think, that type of performance when Joe Burrow went down. I mean, based on what we had seen from Jake Browning. So for him to overcome the expectations that we had set for him kind of as a Bengals community, I think was pretty impressive. Jamar Chase is obviously a great pick. I think in terms of who is the best player, I think he would definitely win the award. Maybe I'm looking at that word value too much and thinking, who else could have? I mean, Trevor Siemian could have been this backup quarterback. We've seen how he played. He's played for the Jets. So I'm going to have Jake Browning. I just think this season, the back half of the season would have gone a lot worse had it been a different quarterback than Jake Browning under center. But I think Jamar Chase is a good pick too. Defensive MVP. This one I think is a open and shut case. It's got to be Trey Hendrickson, right? Franchise record, 17.5 sacks. He finished 10th in pass rush for win rate for the entire league. I don't think there's really another candidate here.
No.
You could mention DJ Reader because I think he's so valuable and because his absence has certainly been felt once he's been hurt, but it's obviously Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah, and I'd put the same thing in parentheses. Runner-up would be DJ Reader if we had to name a runner-up. And even then, I don't think Reader had as good of a year as we're used to seeing him have. I'm not ready to say he's hitting the old guy wall or ready to fall off a cliff. I think it would be great if they could find a way to bring him back. He was really emotional in the locker room yesterday talking. And, a lot of guys, when they're hurt, talk about, I'm going to kill this rehab and I'm going to be better than ever. And he just was just talking about how bad it sucks and how bad it hurts. And to have people questioning you. And even though you don't question yourself, it's just, he was He was in his feels yesterday, and I feel for that guy because he's been
Yeah.
tremendous for this locker room, and I really do hope they figure out. It might be the best thing for the Bengals for that injury to have happened. The fact that they can possibly get him on a cheap deal, and he would mean so much for this team. But if we're talking the award, it's Trey Hendrickson. Mike Hilton said it last week. He'd be mentioned in Defensive Player of the Year in the league if he didn't play in Cincinnati. I don't know about that, but he definitely would be getting more run than what he's getting right now. And it's small market, not team wasn't a playoff team, all that, but he was fantastic this year. And I thought it was interesting that that he had a chance to get the sack record. I mean, you're playing a bunch of backups and you're playing Jeff Driscoll, and he got his half sack, and he basically, I don't know if it's his decision or the coaches, but he was out of there by halftime, and they weren't just trying to pad stats there. And I thought that was telling too, that he did what he did it in the framework of what the team was at that time. And just the remarkable consistency. That half sack is big. That gives him 9 games in a row now with at least half a sack. The NFL record is 12. So if he can do it in the first 3 games next year, he could have that. He already has an 11-game streak in 2021. So just to get that half sack, which they originally didn't give to him, by the way, right. They gave it solely to BJ Hill, and then they went back and they're like, yeah, even though Trey let him go, he probably wouldn't have been a sack if Trey hadn't hit him in the first place. So long-winded answer there, but yeah, Trey Hendrickson, easy choice.
Trey Hendrickson will be coming up in another category for me, at least, that we have later on here. Best newcomer. This can be a rookie or a free agent. Jay, who'd you have for the best newcomer for this season?
Yeah, I struggled with this one because
me too.
The rookie class wasn't great. I was, even though I think you talk about the back end of that defense being the problem, I was really impressed with Jordan Battle. Once he took over as a starter, there were some mistakes there, but that's a guy that I think is going to be a leader on this defense moving forward. They don't have the veterans on that side of the bar. Pratt's been here a while. Hendrickson doesn't say much. Logan Wilson's been here a while, but I feel like Jordan Battle is I don't want to say a future star, but he's a future leader. I can see him in that Von Bell mold eventually. And he played forever at Alabama, and he kind of deferred. He came in and he wanted to be a leader. It's in his nature, but he deferred to the older guys. I think we're going to see a different Jordan Battle next year in terms of vocal and really kind of grabbing that defense and try to make it his. I thought he played, communication breakdown aside, I thought he played really well once he took over as a starter. So I gave him the slight edge over Orlando Brown Jr. I don't think Orlando played great. I don't think he played up to the contract, but it was an improvement. That O-line, every guy started all 17 games. The intangibles he brought to that locker room, the professionalism, the winning attitude. I mean, there's other guys on that team that have been in Super Bowls, obviously, but I thought that he was a key piece. And again, it's kind of an award of attrition because there's not a lot of great options.
I agree. I struggled with this as well. I picked Jordan Battle too. He only played 524 defensive snaps, but it felt like more. It felt like more than that. I mean, full-time player starting in week 11. You mentioned the communication breakdowns. That's an obvious issue that he and Dax Hill are going to have to work on going into next year. But I agree. I think he showed a lot over the back half of the season, and I think he kind of saved the best for last in week 18. He filled up the stat sheet: an interception, 2 pass breakups, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss. I mean, that's a way to go out on your rookie season, right? So I agree. I mean, he was viewed as a leader when he was in college, and I think as you enter your second NFL season, you get more confidence. You've been here in this locker room. He is the type of guy I think that you would look at as in a leadership role going into 2024. I had Orlando Brown as well as a runner-up. I think he was probably like a league average tackle, maybe a little bit worse. It's probably not a good ROI at the end of the day for the money he's making. But it's hard to find offensive tackles, and the Bengals know that as well as any team in the league. So I think just to get pure competence at that left tackle position was a huge improvement. Not that Jonah Williams wasn't competent at times, but that the offensive line as a unit was not competent at times. To get a left tackle who can be there for basically every snap and not be a guy who's giving up a pressure on every play, you got to count it as something as a win, given where this offensive line has been in years past. Let's go to most improved. This is another one that I kind of struggled on, Jay, but I ended up going with Tanner Hudson. And
Yeah.
I know Tanner Hudson was not in Cincinnati last year, but this was a guy who's really never gotten an opportunity in anything close to like a full-time tight end role with any of the teams he's been on. He's been a backup. He's been a special teams guy. He finally got that starting role around week 9, kind of mid-season. After week 9, he was 10th among all tight ends in the league in catches. 10th. And I think he could re-sign next year. I mean, he's a free agent next year. I think you re-sign Tanner Hudson. Maybe you have Drew Sample back in his usual role. Then you go and draft some athletic freak tight end in the 4th or 5th round. I think that's a pretty solid plan for tight end next year. And Tanner Hudson impressed me on multiple occasions, and I didn't know a ton about him before this season. So I'm going to put him for most improved.
Yeah, I did too. I didn't know where to put Jake Browning with this. I mean, obviously, just you go from basically zero. We'd never seen him play before so that was, but he had been here for 3 years. So I was like, do I put Browning in there? But I went Tanner Hudson, 39 catches, 352 yards in his entire career coming into this year. 15 catches, 199 yards. And they needed him. It wasn't like he just kind of bubbled up and played well. We're going to get to the disappointments later, but there was a disappointment at this position big time. They needed Tanner Hudson to be that guy, and kind of disappointing they waited so long to make it happen. But he did. When he finally got in there, absolutely made the best of his opportunity.
And he helped my Dynasty fantasy team as well. So I'll give him extra credit for that. Players we want to see more of in 2024, Jay. I think there were a lot of guys, young guys on this team who got opportunities, but is there someone you really want to see more of heading into next season?
Yeah, Myles Murphy. I think we have to. I think, Sam, he's so well respected. He's meant so much to building this culture, but he had a down year, and that could be the start of the decline of that happens to these D linemen. They get older, and they kind of fall off. He kind of disappeared at times this year. He's still really good against the run, I thought, but as a pass rusher, the juice just wasn't there. He did get a sack. It did go out on a high note with a sack Sunday to give him 6 for the year. But when your second guy has 6 and your first guy has 17.5, you need more from that position. And I thought Myles Murphy, it's weird. It really felt like he was starting to build something, and then it felt like he kind of hit the rookie wall. And it was weird because it's like, well, how did he hit the rookie wall when he barely played? But it's a long season for these guys. It's a grind. It's not used to what the work, the practice, all that stuff they put in. So I want to see a lot more of him. I don't know if he'll be in a starting role next year. I think, a lot of it too is trust, and they trusted Sam Hubbard. I think they could see that Myles was bringing a little more juice toward the end, but it's just once you start fresh and you get into camp, and if Myles Murphy's looking a lot better than Sam Hubbard, I think they need to make that switch. I think Myles needs to start opposite Trey Hendrickson next year.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you spent a first-round pick on the guy. I think you've given him this first season to kind of get acclimated, and year 2 is kind of the time when you need to see something, and they could certainly use more pass rush. There's no question about that. My guy was for this, who I want to see more of in 2024, was Chase Brown.
Yeah.
I think Joe Mixon, odds are he's not going to be here. I don't know. I mean, I think over these past few games, he's done a little more to maybe he could be back next season, but I think he'd have to take another pay cut, and I don't know if he's going to be willing to do that. I think Chase Brown, either way, will have a significant role in this offense next year. I think we've seen it as a rusher, on screens, as a receiver, that he is an incredibly explosive player. He obviously had the screen against the Colts that was 22 plus miles per hour. This is a guy I think that needs to be more involved in this offense going forward, and I think he will be. I'm not sure what the Bengals' plans at running back are going to be. If it's not Mixon, does that mean they'll draft someone else? Does that mean they'll try and sign a cheap veteran free agent back? And there are guys out there we could talk about in the future. But I think either way, Chase Brown should be involved in this offense. Other guys I had were the receivers, Yoshivas and Charlie Jones. Depending on where T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd go, I think those guys could be called on next year to play some significant snaps. Those are my guys for that. Let's be negative, Jay. I mean, this season was not everything that Bengals fans had hoped for, so let's be a little negative. Least valuable player. I'll start with mine. I hate to say it. I hate to do this to anybody on the Bengals roster, but I'm going to say Brad Robbins. It did not go well. They spent a draft pick on a punter, which I think when an NFL team does that, you're hoping you're picking a guy who's going to be there for at least the length of his rookie contract. Brad Robbins, I don't know if he's going to be here for the length of his rookie contract or not. I'm not a punting expert, but I think anybody could see that he struggled this year. There's a website called Puntalytics, which looks at punter EPA. No idea how it's calculated, but he was dead. Brad Robbins was dead last. He was bottom 2 in the percentage of punts that he put inside the 20. It was not a good year. I can't imagine that he'll be back. I don't see how you could go into next season with Brad Robbins as your punter. He's my least valuable player for this year.
I think they will stick with Brad Robbins. I think they will probably bring someone in to compete with them. I'm going to read a quote from Darren Simmons here. I wish we could play the audio, but he was specifically asked about this last week, and he was asked to evaluate his year, and he said, "Yeah, that's a hard one because it's been a long time since I've had to deal with a rookie punter." I think if you ask Brad, he'd probably say the same, that he's a little disappointed in his season. I think there's a lot of room for improvement. I expect him to make giant strides next year. I think it was certainly inconsistent at the beginning, and there have been moments throughout the year it's been inconsistent. There have been some moments where it's been pretty good. I think he still has a lot to learn and how to grow, because punting in the NFL, it's not about lining up back there and swinging away and hitting balls as high and as far as you can. There's so much more situational stuff. I mean, it sounds, Darren's very blunt. It sounds to me like he's disappointed, but encouraged. And one of the things he said there that I didn't read was, and he said this before, he said it about Drew Chrisman last year. He said about Kevin Huber last year that they do it in practice and they just don't translate it to the games. But they've seen him translate it to games at Michigan, high quality college football. And I think there's a belief there that he can get it turned around. So I don't think they're going to just pull the plug. I think they're going to ride with him, bring somebody else in, have a competition. But that's going to be interesting to see, because I think Brad's got it in him. It's just, sometimes a lot of pressure being a rookie, and they were in some situations where, the offense wasn't humming because of the way Joe Burrow was hurt early, and it just kind of built on him. He had some nice bunts in that finale yesterday. He had some bad ones too. That's what Darren's talking about, the inconsistency. Yeah. So I don't want to slap at least valuable on him.
I think it's tough too, because like the Bengals gave up on Jake Elliott too early, a few years back, and look at what he's become for the Eagles as their kicker. And I get not wanting to do that again with another special teamer. I guess my concern would be, I think most people are expecting the Bengals to push for the Super Bowl next year.
Yeah.
You just can't have a guy back there who's going to consistently put you in bad field position. I mean, those are the type of little margins that could come back to bite you at the end of the year. So, I mean, I guess if I would give, if Darren Simmons thinks there can be improvement there, then I would trust Darren Simmons, but the numbers were not good.
Yeah, I went with Irv Smith as my least valuable. I mean, 330 snaps, 18 catches, 2 healthy scratches, and a game that he was active and did not play an entire snap. And that's, that they rolled the dice on this. It wasn't like this was a big surprise. They knew he was kind of a wild card. He had a high ceiling. I don't think they expected the floor to be anything like this, and they didn't draft a guy. And I think there's a disconnect there between the coaching staff and the front office. Zach said all the right things about having trust in the guys they have, but it's clear they would have liked to have had more of a playmaker there, and it really did hurt them. I don't think they're going to make that mistake again. Irv Smith, no way he's back. Just the way that the season kind of fell apart for him, and the total production, just no value there whatsoever.
Along the same lines, biggest disappointment for the season, Jay, who did you have? I had Irv Smith as a candidate for this. He was not my ultimate selection. Who did you have for your?
This is where I put Robbins, because it was disappointing. You expected so much more from him, and his 44.3 average. It was 18th best in franchise history. It's just he comes in with the reputation of a big leg, and we just didn't see it. It's like, okay, well, if he doesn't have the big leg, you got the touch. Well, he didn't have the touch either. He had all the touchbacks and all that. And I wanted to point out, Drew Chrisman last year, 47.8 average, best in franchise history, and he's gone. And that's it goes back to what Darren was saying. It's not just about firing away. There's a touch and a nuance to it, and directional punting. And so the fact that Brad didn't get it right away, that's why I put him disappointment. But I felt least valuable was a little too harsh for the rookie punter.
My biggest disappointment was Joseph Osai. I had such high hopes for this guy coming into this year. I know he suffered the high ankle sprain in the preseason, and he got off to a slow start, but then that slow start pretty much continued through the entire season. He played 177 snaps. That's it. If you would have told me before the season that Osai would have played fewer snaps than Josh Tupou and Zach Carter, and I know there were defensive tackle injuries that forced those guys into the lineup, but 177 snaps for a guy that I think most projected to be their third pass rusher behind Hubbard and Hendrickson. He just was not that in any capacity. And I don't know what that means for him going into the final year of his contract. I would say he's clearly behind Miles Murphy heading into next year. He's behind Cam Sample. I mean, he's fifth at best on this edge rushing depth chart heading into his final year of his rookie contract. And from a person, I thought he could be maybe not like a starting caliber rusher, but maybe a guy like Bryce Huff for the Jets, who he's a specialized pass rusher who's constantly up there in pass rush win weight and pressure rate. He just hasn't been that at all, and I think going into this final season of his rookie deal, he is in the doghouse for sure.
Yeah, I mean, every time we asked Lou about it, he said he just needs to get healthy. And he had the offseason shoulder surgery. He had the awful penalty that really cost him the AFC Championship game. I don't know if there's some residual hard feelings about that.
Yeah.
But well, you're right. It was like he was in the doghouse all year, and so maybe that changes. Maybe he has an off season to fully work out, come back 100% healthy, build his strength back up where it needs to be, and he flashes and looks great in the spring. But it's going to be an uphill climb.
Let's go biggest surprise for the season now. This could be good or bad. This could be on either side of the coin here. As you know, if you watch this show, I'm kind of a negative Nancy, so I'm going to go on the bad side. I'm going to go with the defensive issues. I mean, that just as a general concept, I did not expect this defense to be anywhere as poor as it was. They were dead last in yards per play allowed for this season, 27th in EPA per play. Constant explosive plays. If you've watched the Bengals, you can picture it in your eye, that guy just running wide open down the sidelines, down the middle, nobody around them. Only two teams were worse against the run this season on a down-by-down basis. We talk all the time about how this defense is a bend but don't break unit, but they were still eighth worst in points allowed per drive, right? So they still gave up points when it counted. I think it's going to probably cost Lou Anarumo a chance at a head coaching job. It was just very, very surprising, and it's in a season where Joe Burrow went down, and that you think that would be the kind of the storyline of the season. It was really these defensive issues that would have been the problem, even if Joe Burrow had been here.
Yeah, and it went right to the end. We talked about they're playing a bunch of backups against the Browns, and how's that game in? Two explosive touchdowns, guys wide open in the end zone. Well, one was wide open. It's just that I expected it early. I didn't expect it to linger all the way through the season. So I'm with you there. That would have been, if I went negative. I didn't go negative. I went biggest surprise positive. I mean, Jake Browning. There's no other. I mean, it was it was remarkable what he was able to do, and I had confidence. I told my barber. I went to the barbershop the couple days before the Jacksonville game. He's like, "Do they have a chance?" I was like, "I really think they do. I think Jake. Don't base it on the Pittsburgh game. I think Jake Browning really can be a good quarterback. They're going to work with him, and we saw that he really played well. 4-3." 4-2 after that initial Pittsburgh in his very first start. So I thought he could play well. Never, and the coaches would tell you the same thing. Never in their wildest dreams did they think it would be that well.
Let's go back to the positive. Best bang for your buck. I mean, there were. I didn't consider rookie contracts on this because it kind of throws a wrench in things. So, who did you have for the best bang for your buck? A guy who had a good ROI on his salary.
I mean, Tanner Hudson.
Yeah,
$522,000. I mean, that is a third of what Irv Smith was making, but 3 times the production. I mean, that's the epitome of bang for your buck. And you could throw Jake Browning in there too, $750,000. What he did, both those guys. And I had Drew Sample in the mix too at 1.1. He was a very, very important piece, and people are going to roll their eyes and just look at the lack of tackles he breaks and what they did with him to make him basically the third down back, where he is learning all the protections and really back there doing a great job picking up blitzes. Sneaky, really good season. And I'd be stunned if he's not back, because I'm not sure there's going to be a lot of interest out there. They can bring him back at a similar deal. And I think they should. I really think he played an important role. And you talk about catches and yards per 1.1 million doesn't look that great, but what he meant to this team was pretty important.
Totally agree. He was on my list as well. And I mean, for the league minimum, he had a role, right? That's all you can really ask for. My guy was actually Trey Hendrickson. I think
Yeah,
I know he makes a lot of money, but he's only 10th in annual
yeah.
salary among edge rushers, and he finished second in the league in sacks. I mean, I think if he was on the open market, he would be earning a lot more. And like we talked about before, if he was playing in a different market, he'd be getting more credit around the league and nationally. I think for his salary to be getting his production, you're still getting a value there, even though he's making a lot of money. Assistant coach of the year. For this one, I went with Dan Pitcher.
Yeah.
I think he just did a great job kind of transitioning from Joe Burrow to Jake Browning. You've seen Jake Browning talk about how vital Dan Pitcher has been. I think Dan Pitcher should be an offensive coordinator next year somewhere. If Brian Callahan, we've seen Brian Callahan got a request to interview with the Carolina Panthers for their head coaching job. I think if Callahan goes somewhere, Pitcher is obviously going to be promoted to become the Bengals not play caller, but offensive coordinator. I think even if Callahan stays, I think Pitcher should and probably will attract offensive coordinator interest around the league. I mean, this is the kind of offensive system I think that teams are looking for. And seeing what Pitcher and this offensive staff were able to do with a backup quarterback, probably even more impressive than what they've been able to do with Joe Burrow over the past few years, kind of coming up with these solutions and making things a little easier for a guy who hadn't been in there. So I'm going to go with Dan Pitcher, and I think he's due a promotion somewhere.
Yeah, he was my obvious choice too. James Casey, the tight ends coach, as a backup, what he did with that room was really, really impressive. What he's done with that room, turning CJ Uzama into what he's done, and then Hayden Hurst last year. And yeah, Joe Burrow plays a role in that, but James Casey is an excellent tight ends coach, a guy that played in the league, deserves some credit here. But Dan Pitcher, a lot of people look at what he did with Browning and the production on the field. When it comes to getting these jobs, the interview is so important. Mm-hmm. And I know he's not as front facing as like you guys that watch this and read our stuff, and you hear from Brian Callahan all the time. You don't hear from Pitcher. He is incredibly smart, and he will knock any interview out of the park. And that's why I think he's going to be gone. If someone asks him to come in and do an interview as an offensive coordinator, he's probably going to get that job. He's just that impressive of a guy. And I don't think he's going to be a coordinator for long. I think he's going to be a head coach in this league before you know it. And it'd be great for Bengals fans if he stuck around. But for Dan, I hope he deserves it. And I hope he does get an opportunity somewhere. I hope Brian gets an opportunity somewhere. If they lose them both, then I don't know where they go after that. But I thought this was one of the easiest of questions on this exercise of the awards. Was Dan Pitcher was by far the assistant coach of the year.
And he did get some interest last year. He interviewed with the Buccaneers for their role, and I believe he interviewed twice. Maybe it was scheduled to interview twice, and then decided to remain with the Bengals. So I think he'll be back out there and probably get more interest moving forward. How about best game, Jay? There were a lot of ups and downs this season. A lot of good games, a lot of bad games. What did you have for the best overall game this season for the Bengals?
Yeah, I had two here. It's kind of like that argument for most valuable player. Like, is it the best or is it the most meaningful?
Yeah.
I thought their best game was San Francisco by far. And I know the 49ers were missing some pieces, but that's when they were humming with Burrow, looked like the way they're supposed to look. But I'm going Jacksonville in this one. Kind of touched on it earlier. That's the one that got everything turned around and got the Jake Browning train rolling. And the whole prime time on the road narrative where they hadn't won in a decade on the road under the lights, and just all of that. And they were down in that game and they came back, and clutch field goals from Evan McPherson and clutch plays. And yes, Trevor Lawrence got hurt in that game, but that one was really impressive to me. I thought that was one of their best wins of the year. You might say Minnesota too. I don't know. I don't want to jump. I don't want to steal your thunder, but I mean, they played so bad in that, and then to come back and win was impressive. But overall, the whole feel of the game, everything surrounding the game, I'm going to go with that Jaguars game on Monday night.
Yeah, I think it's a good pick, and it's a question of how you view best game, right? Mm-hmm. And I think best overall performance, that Jacksonville game was very impressive. I had the Niners game as well. That was an incredibly impressive game. I had the Cardinals game just because at the time it felt like Joe Burrow and co were kind of getting back on the right page and getting everything going. But I went with a game against Minnesota just for pure entertainment value. I mean, it had everything you could want, right? I had a comeback down from 14 points in the fourth quarter. You had the amazing T. Higgins touchdown catch. You had the defensive stops. You had overtime. You had the throw to Tyler Boyd. It was just, it was a heart attack of a game, right? It was an incredible, incredible game to watch. Yeah, they didn't best. Did they play the best in that game as opposed to some of their other games? No, but from a pure entertainment value and which game will I maybe remember? For me, it's that one. And I think we'll just roll into favorite or best play of the year too. For me, it's that T. Higgins catch against Minnesota. Yeah. It was just, I can't. I still have not stopped thinking about it. You know, a month later, I still can't believe he had the awareness, the physicality, everything about it to kind of get that ball in the end zone. That's my choice. I've got some other ones here, but Jay, I want to hear what your pick is for best play of the year.
Yeah, well, I went Higgins too, because the pure what happened. I mean, what he did. But then for me personally, it was such a high because my son had literally just graduated from college like 10 minutes before. And I was walking through the parking lot, watching it on my phone. And just that whole experience was kind of different from watching it in a sterile press box. And so it was so memorable and it was so impressive and it's so meaningful to the comeback and everything. So I thought that was an easy choice. My next one, and I guess it can't be favorite or best, but I will maybe most telling play. It was the Irv Smith fumble in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Because they're up 17-10. It's just before halftime. They got a chance to go up 24-10 on one of the best teams in the league and a team that hasn't lost at home in forever. And they have that just brutal turnover and it didn't matter. They overcame it. And I thought that was really telling. I thought that was a big statement on this team to overcome that. And I've got one other thing on that fumble that I'll get to later as a stat at the end of this exercise or the end of these awards. But that one just really stood out to me where I think that's when Irv got completely planted in the doghouse and kind of ended his season. But it said so much about this team and its resolve to that could have been a killer. And it wasn't. They overcame it and they won that game pretty easily despite it.
Some of my other choices for best play were those consecutive third and fourth down and one stops in overtime versus Minnesota. You know, we've heard so much about the tush push and it can't be stopped, and the Bengals stopped it. The Browning throw to Boyd at the end of overtime was also an incredible play to get them in field goal range to win that game. Chase Brown's screen touchdown against the Colts that we talked about where he hit 22 plus miles an hour. I think that was just a great kind of coming out play for him. And then going back to that Arizona game, the Burrow 63-yard bomb to Jamar Chase, again, felt like kind of, hey, we're getting back to old times here, the Joe to Jamar show, and it felt great at the time. And then the Cam Taylor Britt pick six against Arizona, I thought was a really impressive, meaningful, impactful play that I will not forget. So I think a lot of highlights for this season. The other side of the coin here, how about dumbest play of the season, Jay? What did you have? I had a couple options for this. What was your choice?
Well, I don't want to go dumbest, but when we came up with these categories, it's dumbest / worst.
Yes.
So by far, 4th and 1 at Kansas City, worst play. I mean, they didn't expect the front they got. They came out in a goal line front. It was just something totally different. It was not. The front didn't confuse them. It's what they did out of that front to bring Chris Jones not Chris Jones, but Willie Gay. Yeah. It just the ramifications of that play and what it meant and how it turned that game around, basically killed the season. I mean, if they win that game, they're in the playoffs. So it was just a away win. Maybe they wouldn't have been.
I honestly can't remember at this point if they would have or not.
Because they Buffalo would have finished ahead of them and Pittsburgh would have finished tied. And they would have not have won.
I don't think they would have anyway.
But they would have had a shot at least on that final week of the season. And it just everything that play meant. It was. I don't think it was a bad play call. We talked about it at the time. It was the right decision to go for it. Running Joe Mixon, yes, he's not great, but that's your best option if you're going to try to get short yardage. He's good on the goal line. They're in a goal line front. Everything made sense. It just didn't work out. It's one of those plays where you look at -3 and you scratch your head and you throw things and fans are angry. But just I couldn't think of a worse play in terms of everything surrounding it.
That was my choice as well. It was a terrible, again, not a terrible play call, but the situation, everything surrounding it, what it meant for the season. I think you have to pick that. A couple other options I had: the Tyler Boyd double pass versus
Yeah.
Jacksonville. I mean, the Jags had just scored to tie the game. You immediately turned the ball over and let them score another touchdown. We talked about at the time that they're trying to generate explosive plays using trick plays and trick concepts. So it wasn't the worst idea in the world. Execution was terrible. And then one other one, which it didn't end up meaning anything. It wasn't a horrible outcome or anything like that. But do you remember the 3rd and 1? It was early in the game against Minnesota where they tried to have Tanner Hudson roll out and throw a pass. That was on my list as well. Yeah. I think that was a poor call. Tanner Hudson should have thrown that ball away. If I recall, they probably could have gone for it on 4th down there. Don't know what they were thinking with that. We've spoken Tanner Hudson's praises throughout this show, but he should not have been put in a position to pass in that situation. So, but the 4th and 1 against KC has got to be the top choice for worst play of the year.
Yeah, Tanner Hudson did play quarterback in college. So I think that's where that came from. I think the trick play in Jacksonville was a little bit of brotherly competition where he's like, I'm gonna show Crest something special here, and they've hit that play before. So anytime those trick plays don't work, you throw them in the dumb or the worst category. So I'm with you there. But yeah, Kansas City, by far, that was the one that kind of epitomized a worst play.
All right, let's wrap up, Jay. Let's wrap up these awards with favorite stat. I'm not even going to try to compete with the master here. Jay's got stats. Time to cook. Jay, what have you got for us here to wrap up our awards for the year?
Yeah, it's nothing crazy that I had to dig up. It's just something that has really impressed me from day one when Zach got here. And it's something that drives me absolutely insane when I watch other games, last night's national championship game, all these false starts. And it's just like, why even practice? Why is this happening? The Bengals have been incredible. 76 penalties this year, one shy of best in the league. The Raiders somehow only had 75. The Raiders seem like every year they're the most penalized team. Not the case this year. Penalty yards this year, 614, lowest in the NFL. As impressive as that is, that's not a one-off. If you look at fewest penalties and fewest penalty yards for the last 2 seasons, Bengals are best. Last 3 seasons, Bengals are best. Last 4 seasons, Bengals are best. Last 5 seasons, since Zach Taylor got here, even with the 2-14 season in 2019 and the 4-11-1 in 2020, they are still the best, least penalized team in the league. And that's part of a culture. That's coaching. I know a lot of people like to bang on Zach, but that is really impressive to be able to do this consistently, and it helps you win games. Penalties obviously can cost you games, and even when they have penalties, they're not these egregious ones that really kill them. And so I think that's really impressive that it's year after year after year. And a runner-up one here is this year the Bengals had 16 giveaways. You played a backup quarterback for 7 games, and they still finished tied for second in the league with fewest turnovers at 16. And 7 of the top 11 teams in that stat are playoff teams. 16 giveaways also ties the Bengals franchise record. They also did it in 1982 when they only played 9 games because there was a strike. So this is by far their best season in terms of taking care of the ball. And of those 16 turnovers, 2 were fumbles, lost fumbles. That ties the NFL record for fewest lost fumbles in a season. And that's my callback to the Herb Smith one. The Herb Smith one before halftime in San Francisco. The only other one they had was a strip sack of Burrow in week 4 against Tennessee. They did not fumble the ball. Joe Mixon, you say what you will, not very explosive, struggles in short yardage time. He doesn't fumble. And that's a big part of that. But it's also the O-line playing better, Burrow not taking these shots that lead to strip sacks, those kind of things. So the previous record for fewest lost fumbles in a season for the Bengals was 4 in 2018. The next fewest was 6 in 2022. So again, we're seeing a pattern develop here where they're taking care of the ball and not committing penalties that's going to lead to more wins. And this, like I said, this was not a one-off this year. It's something that they can carry into next year, and you get all the pieces back. You fill in the holes that you're missing. You continue with that nuts and bolts element of the game, and I think they're going to be in good shape.
It's really interesting. I mean, it's a solid foundation to build from, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of what else is going on the roster and the team and anything else, opponents. It's I think it speaks to the coaching staff, like you said, to have a disciplined team that year after year is not committing these either penalties or giveaways that you see teams all over the NFL constantly lose games with these self-inflicted errors. It's really impressive. That is honestly really impressive, and I was not aware of those stats. Like to see not just that it's a one-off thing, but that it's been year over year over year, and that gives you confidence that it can continue moving forward, especially when Joe Burrow comes back. And yeah, that is really impressive, and I think that gives them kind of a baseline of competence where they're not going to get blown out, they're not going to bottom out because they're this disciplined team, I think, and you've got to give credit to Zach Taylor for that, for that attitude as well. Yeah, that is really impressive. Jay, let's finish up here with our bets for the week. We've been doing our bets all season long. Unfortunately, we will not get to have a Bengals bet this week, but we will have a couple of bets for you for the playoffs. So, Jay, where do we stand heading into this wild card round?
So I pushed again last week. I had Cincinnati, Cleveland as my Bengals bet. I took the over at 38.5, and that cashed on the final touchdown by the Browns. I tried another parlay, an AFC East parlay, and I lost them both. I went Patriots -2.5, Dolphins +3. So I pushed for the week. I remain at -6 units on the season. You had Tampa -5.5 and won that. I think a lot of people thought that was going to be more of a blowout than 9-0, but they did cover. So that was a win for you. And then you set your own line on Chase Brown touches at 12, and he finished with exactly 12. So.
Yes, he did. I was watching that closely.
he had 2 targets. Only one he caught. I can't remember how the other one ended, but he had a chance there. And
if we call it opportunities, then we can say.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you were at -30 units, so you improved to -20. So we're both in pretty good shape here going into our wild card round or super wild card round.
Yes.
Bets.
All right. I will go ahead and give my games, and both of mine are for AFC North teams. So the first one I'm going to take is actually against the Browns. I'm going to go with Houston +2.5 versus Cleveland. I think this will be a close game either way, but CJ Stroud, incredibly impressive, does not turn the ball over at all, led the league in interception rate. Cleveland Browns have a good defense, but they also rely heavily on turnovers. And Joe Flacco has been playing well, not afraid to turn the ball over at all. He's been giving the ball away. I think if you kind of look at how that turnover situation could play out, I like Houston at home. My other one, I will take Pittsburgh +10 against Buffalo. I do not think they will win, but I do think this could be just a sloppy, cold, gross kind of game where Josh Allen is not taking care of the ball as he normally is wont to do. Pittsburgh, I don't think they'll win, but 10 points for a Mike Tomlin team, I'll take that.
Yeah, a lot of pressure on Buffalo. The way they lost that game last year to Cincinnati, the divisional game, just being a 10-point favorite. They're playing well right now. That was impressive what they did to go 6-6 and then run the table and make it and go down to Miami and win the division. So as much as it has a little bit of a house money feel, but that is not house money at all. That team has forever felt like it's right on the cusp of something special. And if they lose in that first home game again this year, that is not going to go over well in Buffalo. So I love that pick. I didn't go with it. I actually matched you on the Houston Cleveland pick, and I had wrote down Houston -2.5, and I was still willing to take them at -2.5. So I was wrong about that. They're actually getting points from the Browns. So yeah, I would money line them. I love what the Browns have done this year. It's been so impressive. I think Stefanski should be the coach of the year with going through 5 quarterbacks, counting Driscoll. But Flacco he puts the ball in danger too much, and Houston just feels like it's got something special. And getting CJ Stroud back after the 2-game concussion absence, I think that's going to be a game Houston's going to win. And then I stuck with Saturday, and I mean, this is like a bet the farm kind of game. If you have Kansas City -4 against Miami, Miami's just decimated by injuries.
Yeah.
They're a warm weather team. They're going to be playing in single digit weather. Kansas City is incredible at home in the playoffs. It feels like they found a little something, kind of getting back to their roots. I know they had to settle for a bunch of field goals against the Bengals, but it felt like that was a little bit of a tide turn for them. And then they got to kind of rest their starters, Mahomes and a lot of their starters last week. And just, I don't know, I think Miami's just walking into a buzz. So I don't think that game is going to be close at all. And no one's going to see it anyhow because it's going to be on Peacock.
That's a good reminder. I got to get my free trial of Peacock and pay my $6 for my one game. Yeah, no, I agree. I think KC will win that game, and it's so funny because in the past years, you pick Chiefs playoff games, and it's like, oh, Patrick Mahomes, he's not going to lose in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like this defense isn't going to lose in the playoffs, right? I think L'Jarius Sneed has been a really impressive cornerback this year, and if Jalen Waddle doesn't play, and they can have Sneed with help against Tyreek Hill. I mean, I'm not sure what this Miami Dolphins offense, as impressive as it's been this season, not sure what they're going to be able to do against that Kansas City Chiefs defense. So I like that pick as well. It's going to be a fun weekend of games, Jay. We talked earlier, both our wives are out of town this weekend. So we're sitting on the couch and watching a lot of football this weekend. I just want to say thanks to everyone for watching and listening all season.
Yes.
This has been a great opportunity, I think, for Jay and I, and we've really, really appreciated the support on YouTube and all the other platforms and the feedback we've received. So I really, really appreciate it personally. Jay, to be able to get to do this with you all season has been truly an honor, not to get sappy here at the end of the show, but really, really have had a great time. And the show's not going anywhere. The Bengals season is over, but we have got so much to talk about through this offseason. It's going to be a massive offseason for the Bengals from a free agency perspective, from a draft perspective, possibly from a coaching perspective. There's a ton to get into, so we will not be going anywhere. Jay, anything before we wrap up this final end of season podcast here?
No, just saying, I'd like to echo what you say. Just thank you for being such a great part of this and a great partner. And, leaving one and going to a new one, you don't know how it's going to go. And it just felt like we just kind of jumped right in and went full steam ahead from the start. And you've been great as, someone that is not in Cincinnati. Like, you are as knowledgeable about the Bengals as anybody. And it's just been a lot of fun to do this podcast. Very, very easy and great getting to know you. Like, we work for the same company, but we never see, we Slack, but it feels like this is the kind of the bonding and where the friendship starts. And so it has been great. Thank you to everybody that has downloaded, subscribed, done all of that. It means a lot. Encourage us to keep going. We're kind of come up with brainstorm some new ideas for next season. Also for this off season, I would love to kind of get you guys, the viewers, involved a little more, maybe with some reader questions. And we just kind of found our way through season one, and bigger, better, more things to come as we move into season two.
Absolutely, Jay. Well said. Everyone, thanks again for listening, and be back next Tuesday. Don't know what we'll talk about yet. We've got an entire offseason to plan here, so we will be back and talk about whatever comes up on this Bengal side of things. So again, thank you for listening. We'll be back next Tuesday.